Chapter 1163 just dropped the most twisted villain ability we've ever seen, and it completely rewrites everything we thought we knew about the God Valley incident. Imu's power, Domi Reversi, doesn't just make people stronger or grant immortality. It literally inverts someone's personality and turns them into a demonic slave who obeys Imu's every command. But here's where the theory gets absolutely insane. Fans are now piecing together evidence that suggests Imu specifically lured Xebec to God Valley by threatening his family, knowing that Domi Reversi only works when someone's in their homeland. Once Rox arrived to save his loved ones, Imu trapped him with this ability and forced him to massacre his own family. Yeah, you heard that right. The most feared pirate in history, the guy who made Roger and Garp look like underdogs, was turned into a puppet and made to kill the very people he came to protect. This theory transforms Rox from a pure villain into a tragic figure, someone who was manipulated and controlled by Imu's psychological warfare. It also finally explains why Roger and Garp formed their legendary alliance at God Valley. They weren't just fighting an evil pirate trying to destroy the world. They were fighting to stop Imu's manipulation and free Rox from demonic control before the damage became irreversible. The God Valley incident has always been one of One Piece's greatest mysteries. This event that shaped the entire world but was erased from history by the world government. Now we're learning it wasn't just a battle between pirates and marines. It was Imu's trap. A calculated plan to eliminate threats while demonstrating the terrifying power of Domi Reversi. And if Imu could do this to someone as powerful as Rox, what's stopping them from using it on other major characters? Could Luffy be vulnerable if he ever returns to his homeland? This revelation raises the stakes for the final saga to absolutely insane levels. Let's break down what we actually know about Domi Reversi and how this theory connects all the pieces of the God Valley puzzle. First, the ability itself. According to the latest chapter leaks and fan analysis, Domi Reversi is one of Imu's most sinister powers. It works by inverting a person's entire personality, turning their values, motivations, and moral compass completely upside down. Someone who loves their family becomes willing to destroy them. Someone who fights for freedom becomes a slave to Imu's will. The technique requires something called a demonic contract, which suggests there's a ritual or specific conditions that must be met for it to work. And here's the crucial detail that makes this theory possible. Domi Reversi appears to be most effective, or perhaps only effective, when the target is in their homeland. Now let's talk about God Valley itself. We know from previous chapters that God Valley was the site of a massive incident 38 years ago that involved Xebec and his legendary crew, which included future Yonko like Whitebeard, Big Mom, and Kaido. The incident was so significant that the world government completely erased God Valley from maps and history books. Roger and Garp, two people who should have been enemies, teamed up to fight against Rox during this event. But the actual details have always been murky. Why did Rox go to God Valley? What was he trying to accomplish? And why would Roger and Garp, who represented completely different philosophies, unite against him? The new theory suggests God Valley was Rox's homeland. This is huge because it means Imu could set up the perfect trap. If Imu wanted to eliminate or control Rox, the most dangerous pirate threatening the world government's power, they'd need to lure him somewhere specific. So Imu orchestrated an attack on God Valley, threatening Rox's family and loved ones, knowing he'd come to save them. Rox was powerful and ambitious, sure, but he clearly had people he cared about based on how his crew operated. When word reached him that God Valley was under attack and his family was in danger, he had no choice but to return home. And that's exactly what Imu wanted. Once Rox arrived at God Valley, Imu was ready with Domi Reversi. The homeland requirement was met. Whatever ritual or contract Domi Reversi requires was prepared. And then Imu struck, inverting Rox's personality and taking control of his actions. Under Imu's influence, Rox became something demonic, an immortal slave who turned on his own family and began massacring the people he came to protect. This explains why Roger and Garp had to intervene. They weren't just stopping an evil pirate from conquering the world or obtaining some powerful weapon. They were fighting to stop the carnage that Imu was orchestrating through Rox. They were trying to break Imu's control and prevent Rox from destroying everything and everyone he loved. This theory also explains why the world government erased God Valley from history so completely. It wasn't just about hiding whatever happened there. It was about covering up Emu's involvement and the existence of Domi Reversi. If people knew the world government's secret leader could manipulate and control even the strongest pirates, forcing them to betray their own families, it would spark revolutions across the entire world. The truth of God Valley reveals that Emu isn't just powerful, they're willing to use psychological manipulation and turn people into weapons against their will. That's way more terrifying than any military strength or ancient weapon. The demonic contract aspect is particularly interesting because it suggests there are rules or limitations to Domi Reversi. Maybe it requires the target's consent in some twisted way, or maybe it can only be used on people with D in their name, or maybe it requires specific circumstances like being in someone's homeland. Whatever the exact conditions are, Emu clearly planned everything carefully to ensure Rox would be vulnerable when the moment came. Let's dig into why this theory is so significant and what it reveals about One Piece's endgame. First major point, this completely recontextualizes Rox D. Xebec as a character. For years, Rox has been portrayed as this ultimate villain, someone so dangerous that even Roger and Garp had to team up to stop him. But if the Domi Reversi theory is true, Rox becomes a tragic figure instead. He was a powerful pirate with big ambitions, sure, but he also had family he cared about. When they were threatened, he rushed home to save them, and that compassion became his downfall. Emu exploited his love for his family to trap and control him, forcing him to commit the exact atrocity he was trying to prevent. That's heartbreaking on a level we rarely see in One Piece. It also fits perfectly with the series' themes about inherited will and the tragedy of the D clan. The world government has always feared people with D in their name because they're the natural enemies of the celestial dragons. What better way to eliminate that threat than by turning D clan members against themselves? Second point, Roger and Garp's alliance finally makes complete sense with this context. These two were ideological opposites. Roger was a pirate who represented freedom and chasing dreams, while Garp was a marine who believed in justice and protecting people within the system. They shouldn't have worked together, but if they both realized what Emu was doing to Rox, if they understood this was bigger than pirate versus marine, then their alliance becomes an act of humanity rather than just strategy. They were fighting to free Rox from demonic control and stop Emu's manipulation before it caused even more damage. This also adds tragic weight to Roger's final years. He learned the true history at Laugh Tale, discovered the Void Century's secrets, and understood what the world government and Emu were really capable of. The God Valley incident must have haunted him because he'd witnessed firsthand how Emu could destroy someone by turning them into a weapon against their own loved ones. Third point, the homeland requirement for Domi Reversi creates fascinating strategic implications for the final saga. If Emu can only use this ability when someone's in their homeland, then major characters need to avoid returning home when the final confrontation happens. Think about the implications for Luffy. His homeland is technically Fuchsia Village in the Goa Kingdom on Dawn Island. If Emu wanted to trap Luffy the same way they trapped Rox, they could orchestrate an attack on Dawn Island, threaten Makino and the people Luffy grew up with, and force him to return. Once Luffy's there, Emu could use Domi Reversi to control him and turn him into a demonic slave just like Rox. This raises the stakes dramatically because it means Luffy can't just charge into any situation. He needs to be strategic about when and where he confronts Emu. The homeland weakness also explains why Emu has stayed hidden in Maria Joie for so long. Maybe Domi Reversi works both ways. Maybe Emu is most vulnerable in their own homeland, wherever that is, and that's why they never leave the Holy Land. Fourth point, this theory establishes Emu as the series' most psychologically manipulative villain. One Piece has had plenty of powerful antagonists. Doflamingo controlled people with strings, Kaido ruled through strength and fear, Big Mom used life force manipulation. But Emu's approach is more insidious. Domi Reversi doesn't just control your body, it inverts your entire personality and forces you to destroy everything you value while being fully aware of what's happening. That's psychological torture on a level we haven't seen before. It also makes Emu's immortality even more terrifying because they've had centuries to perfect these manipulation techniques. The Gorose's loyalty suddenly makes more sense too. Maybe they're not willing servants, maybe some or all of them were subjected to Domi Reversi at some point and are trapped in demonic contracts serving Emu against their original nature. What makes this theory particularly compelling is how it ties together so many loose threads from One Piece lore. The mystery of God Valley, the erasure of history, Roger and Garp's alliance, Rock's true nature, Emu's powers, the significance of homelands and inherited will. It all connects into one tragic story of manipulation and control, and it sets up the final conflict as being about more than just physical strength. Luffy will need to find a way to break Emu's psychological warfare and free anyone trapped under Domi Reversi's influence. So, what do you think? Does this theory explain the God Valley incident perfectly, or are there holes we're missing? Could Emu have used Domi Reversi on other major characters throughout history? And how can Luffy possibly fight against an ability that turns people into demonic slaves? If Homeland is the key vulnerability, does that mean the final battle can't happen at Laugh Tale or any character's home territory? The Domi Reversi revelation changes everything we thought we knew about Emu's threat level, and the implications for how this story ends are absolutely wild.